Welcome back to ProSex Studios. I'm Brian Downs, and on this channel I discuss how sexuality is presented in popular media, in film and on television shows, the attitudes about sexuality that the filmmakers are presenting to you, the audience, and we talk about how that affects our cultural perception of the issue of sex. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the tragically underappreciated The Only Living Boy in New York from 2017, a film produced by Amazon Studios. A terrific little drama romance with some terrific, let me repeat the word terrific performances. A very true-to-life script, I feel, reflecting the idiosyncrasies of human personality and the sloppiness of human emotion. Not well appreciated. Its Rotten Tomato scores aren't high, which only proves how dumb people are. You should see this movie. What is its attitude towards sexuality? We're about to find out. The film opens with our hero, Thomas Webb, a young man, early 20s, living in New York. Tom lives in New York, so do his parents, Judith and Ethan. Judith is played by Cynthia Nixon, and his dad is played by Pierce Brosnan. His dad is a well-to-do publishing executive, and they're rich people in New York. Thomas, who's played by Callum Turner, is out at an art gallery with Mimi, his friend. Not his girlfriend, his friend. Mimi is played by Kiersey Clemens. So they're at this art gallery together in New York. This movie is about New York. Look at the title. Or it's at least about that fantasy of New York, the New York of beauty and culture, the center of the universe, that glamour that New Yorkers throw at the rest of us to try to convince us that they're not insane. They're out at this art gallery, and they are bemoaning the higher per capita income in New York in the late 20-teens and the lower crime rates compared to the apocalypse of the 1970s. New York has lost its soul. Here's the point. Mimi is not Tom's girlfriend. No, she's not. He's besotted with her. But she's not his girlfriend. They just go out to art galleries together and stand about very close to one another while she gazes up into his eyes. But Mimi has a boyfriend named Nick. Nick is a rock star in a band that's on tour. And while Nick's on tour, Mimi spends her time with Thomas and acting like they're on a date. In fact, the two of them alone together quite a bit. In this scene in the art gallery, the staging is such that she's constantly turning away from him and then turning back and looking up at him, then walking away, then turning back. Very much, follow me, look at me, center your attention on me, I'm leaving you. Mimi refuses to go to a dinner party that night with Thomas's mother because the last one made her feel invisible. Mimi is someone who needs to feel visible. But Mimi has something to tell Thomas. She hesitantly admits that she's going out of the country for a long period of time. Maybe she's going out of the country to attend a writing workshop run by Helmut Graf. Mimi is a writing student. Thomas says, that's terrible. Mimi says, why? No, why is that terrible? Thomas says, because you're the only thing in my life that I'm settled on. Mimi looks him in the face and, from inches away and says, Thomas, what do you think is happening between me and you? What do you think this is? Well, it looks like a date, Mimi. Your body language is flirtatious. You're out alone with Thomas, which they will repeat several times in the film, going out on these very date-like excursions. But she's going to insist, what do you think is happening, you crazy person? Thomas replies immediately, August 8th. I think August 8th was real. She agrees that August 8th was real. She agrees that it was amazing. But it was just one night. Nick was out of town, and she was vulnerable. She was lonely. They were both on Molly together. She thought she was a pirate. The movie never specifies what exactly happened on August 8th. Did they have a sexual encounter? Did they sleep together? Did he penetrate her with his penis? The movie never actually tells us if that happened. I'm coming down on no. But here's Mimi with, oh yes, well, yes, we went out together and took sex drugs together while we were evidently alone together, but this isn't a relationship. You're in a relationship, Mimi. You might not have gone to bed with Thomas, but you're clearly acting like you're in a relationship. Now, this is one of my sub-themes, or the sub-theme really on this channel, something I refer to periodically: bad behavior in female characters. That we would never accept in male characters, this kind of will she, won't she, what's going on here. We would never take that from a male character. If a man behaved this way, we would say this guy's a jerk. But Mimi does it, and Thomas is besotted with her, and we're like, oh, that's cute. No, it's not cute. I'm like, wow, she's an asshole of unusually outsized credentials. She's absolutely tormenting this poor guy. She behaves exactly like they're dating, and then insists that they're not dating. Stop it, Mimi. So what we've got here is that in the first few minutes of the movie, it shows us that Thomas's sex life is, number one, sexless. Our hero isn't having any sex, or maybe once had sex with Mimi, but he's not having any active sex life. You know why? Because heroes don't have sex. It's bad for people to have sex. That's one of my negative memes. Serious people don't sex. This is not about Thomas's sex life because there's no sex. It's about Thomas's shame life. It's about Thomas's disappointment, Thomas's pain. Thomas goes home to the apartment building he lives in, and he meets his new neighbor, an older man, who introduces himself as W.F. Gerald. The older man's played by Jeff Bridges, in a terrific performance. Really, I think the performances in this movie by Kiersey Clemons, by Jeff Bridges, by this kid playing Thomas, all very good. And W.F. Gerald makes friends with Thomas and can tell by Thomas's demeanor that he's got something on his mind, and Thomas winds up confiding in him about Mimi. And WF gives Thomas some advice. Make Mimi more afraid of being without you than of being with you. 13 minutes into the film, Thomas and Mimi are out alone together again, sitting in a place where their faces are inches apart out in the evening. They're at a jazz club, drinks on the table, just the two of them. It's not a party, it's not a group of friends. Looks a hell of a lot like a date. Mimi's batting her eyes at him. Again, it is still Mimi's position that they're not dating. And Thomas happens to see in the lower level of the club his father. His rather distant and forbidding father, but his father, played by Pierce Brosnan, down there, being seated at a table with a woman not his wife, as the term of art goes. A beautiful woman. A very enchanting woman. Who Thomas's father immediately starts canoodling with, and Thomas goes, oh my God, my dad's having an affair. That woman, we will learn later, is named Joanna. She's played by Kate Beckinsale. Again, wonderful performances in this film. A wonderful performance by Kate Beckinsale, who's very talented. This is either negative meme number 3, your problem is sex, where a protagonist is presented as being flawed because they have sex, because they're interested in sex, because they pursue sex, because they get sex, or because they pursue sex and they don't get sex. If you want to look at Ethan, Thomas's father, played by Pierce Brosnan, as a protagonist, then it's number 3. If he's not a protagonist, then it's negative meme number 5. It's villains who sex. Bad people want sex, have sex, are sexually attractive, are sexually active. And very often you find out who is good and who is bad by who is celibate and who is not. Thomas, for example, is celibate as far as we can tell. His father is having a sex life with Joanna. This is bad. Thomas is disturbed by this. We get a moment back at Mimi's apartment. Mimi takes them back to her apartment. Thomas is very upset. He's sitting on her couch. They're both drinking. Mimi is sitting so close to him, their legs are touching. She's leaning into his face. She's telling him, oh, you're not like them. You're a good person. Don't worry about that. Thomas is upset. She's hovering over him. Thomas kisses her. She draws back, looking annoyed. Don't do that. Mimi, you could have sat in the other chair. Now, I understand that it's popular in our culture today to say that all sexual encounters are legal negotiations, devoid of passion or emotion. And that's simply not true. Experts tell us that 80% of what you communicate is done through body language and tone. Only 20% is the actual words. And when you sit with someone with whom you're emotionally intimate, so close that they can feel your breath on their face and murmur to them in low tones about what a wonderful person they are and comfort them, then they're probably going to kiss you. She knows how he feels. She's inviting that. If she didn't want that, she could have sat in the other chair. Anyway, she draws back and says, "Don't do that." And Thomas says, "Oh, okay, all right, And Thomas leaves, frustrated and annoyed by his whole life. So what we have so far in this film is that Thomas's desire for sex and romance with Mimi brings him nothing but pain and torment and disappointment. Sex is what's wrong with you. And his father Ethan's desire for and achievement of sex and romance with Joanna makes him deserving of criticism and contempt. It might even put him in the category of villain in this movie. Notice how nobody wins. Nobody's sex life is okay. Mimi is allegedly having a sex life with Nick, the boyfriend, who we never see. Never appears, doesn't get any lines. We never hear his voice on a telephone. He is a non-entity. And Mimi never refers to a sex life with Nick. She says that he's her boyfriend. I think she uses the word boyfriend. But she doesn't say, my lover, my sex partner, I'm in a passionate sexual relationship with Nick. That doesn't happen. So Mimi's nearly celibate as well. No one is enjoying their sex life, that's for sure. Notice, too, that we're going to move on to seeing Ethan's marriage, or some of Ethan's marriage, to Judith, played by Cynthia Nixon, in a smaller supporting role, but also very good. Just first-rate actors in this film. Their relationship is devoid of passion or eroticism of any kind. Now, they're both 50-something. Okay, they're a little older. They throw a dinner party, the dinner party Mimi refused to go to. They sit at opposite ends of the table. We do not see them. I don't even think they speak directly to each other at the dinner party. Maybe they do, I don't remember. In any case, we never see them kiss, embrace. They don't refer to a sex life inside their marriage. And this is one of my negative memes, celebrating celibate marriage. We are supposed to feel that Ethan should be devoted to his relationship with Judith and should not be snuggling up with Kate Beckinsale in jazz clubs. His relationship with Kate Beckinsale is clearly more physical. He holds her hand, he kisses her face, he leans in close. He's physically separate from Judith. It's that sexless marriage we're supposed to support. Sexless marriage is good. Marriage is supposed to be without passion or eroticism, and marriage is what you're supposed to devote yourself to. It's basically presenting marriage as a monastery. 21 minutes into the film, Thomas starts to follow Joanna. He's very upset about what's going on, and he starts to follow her in the street. He wants to know more about her, and he's trying to work up the courage to ask her to stop having this affair with his father. It's a very telling scene that he brings Mimi along just long enough for Thomas to get eyes on Joanna. Then he turns to Mimi and says, "Yeah, I'll call you later," and follows Joanna. She sees through his clumsy spycraft very quickly. She knows that she's being followed, and she recognizes Thomas because her boyfriend Ethan has got pictures of his son in his office. So she invites him to lunch. Joanna, it turns out, is a freelance editor, therefore works in the publishing industry. That's how she knows Ethan. That's how she met him. Notice that in a trope of the 21st century and modern history generally, the female characters are always 2 steps ahead of Thomas, right? Joanna sees through his spycraft. Mimi is leading him around by the nose. Any woman in the room is smarter and faster than Thomas is. Joanna starts flirting with Thomas right away. She's evidently been excited by this attention he's showing her. And in their first meeting, she says to him, "You are trying to make love to me, and you don't even realize it." Well, Joanna is played by Kate Beckinsale, who is Kate Beckinsale. And, Joanna is a very sophisticated, intelligent, beautiful, and sexual woman. She's very attractive. And Thomas tries to insist to himself that he's not attracted to her. Why? Why does he have to insist to himself that he's not attracted to Joanna? Because if he's attracted to Joanna, then maybe his father's attraction to Joanna makes sense or can be sympathized with. Maybe sexuality is something that happens to human beings, but we have to deny that. So Thomas unsettled by everything in his life, returns to his new friend WF, played by Jeff Bridges, and is having a conversation with him. And WF says, "Do you want to have sex with Joanna?" And he maneuvers Thomas into admitting that he does. Thomas says, "This conversation is perverse." WF says, "Stop drowning yourself in what you believe is moral." And Thomas finally admits, "Yes, I am sexually attracted to Joanna." Who wouldn't be? Look at her. I mean, wow. But also, of course, this is very Oedipal. If he possesses his father's lover, then he becomes a man. It's 31 minutes into the movie. Thomas goes and picks up Mimi from her job at a bookstore. They're going to go to a wedding. Thomas arrives to pick her up in a suit and tie. Mimi, on the other hand, changes her clothes in the cab, sitting next to Thomas. She doesn't change her clothes in the restroom at the bookstore. She doesn't change her clothes in the restroom at the wedding reception or anything like that. She changes her clothes in the cab. Look at me. Isn't this a casual intimacy we have? Look at these beautiful tits. I'm not your girlfriend, though. Cut to the wedding reception. Mimi is wearing a very tight and low-cut dress. Thomas says to her, "I couldn't have handled today without you." Although, why he says that isn't clear to me. What was so upsetting about today? That this doesn't seem to be the same day he spoke to Joanna. Mimi replies with, "You know, I got hit on 3 times coming from the bathroom. I'm pretty sure they're all married." Thomas is trying to say, "Hey, thank you for being here. You're a great comfort to me." And Mimi replies with, "I want to emphasize how attractive I am." Who gets hit on literally 3 times on your way back from the bathroom? That seems unlikely. But that's what she wants to tell him. That's what she wants him to know. And then Thomas encounters Joanna at the wedding. Joanna is introduced to Thomas by Erwin, a multi-millionaire who's going to be buying the Knicks soon. Erwin says, "This is my friend Joanna," and Joanna does not publicly acknowledge ever having met Thomas before. Later, though, she comes up to him, having been seeing the looks he's shooting her down the table, and says, "Hey, it's none of your business. I don't have to explain myself to you, but I'm not dating Erwin." And Thomas is like, "Well, don't spend too much time with me. I'm sure he paid for the whole night." She gets very annoyed at him talking about her like she's a prostitute, and drags him off into a kind of a corner, another room, and says, "No, Erwin is gay, and I'm his beard. He doesn't want to come out publicly, so I come to these things with him and give the impression that he's interested in women." Thomas can't resist telling Joanna a story he's imagined about how Joanna and Thomas's father, Ethan, became lovers. He's imagined it in some detail. Thomas is a bit of a storyteller. He's been thinking about Joanna's sex life with his dad in great detail. She is so flattered by this attention that she accepts his impulsive kisses, and they're off to the races. They will become lovers. This is one of the few scenes in the film where Thomas is actually assertive. 40 minutes into the film, we get really the only sex scene in the film. Thomas and Joanna are in her apartment. She is straddling him. They're both fully clothed. They are kissing and talking, and here is where Thomas admits that he wants to be a writer. He's always wanted to be a writer. But Ethan, his father, the publisher, has discouraged this. And so Thomas hasn't pursued it. And Joanna says, "Well, I want to read your work." The scene is touching. It's beautiful. It's sexually exciting. You know, here 2 good-looking people in a passionate embrace, even though they're fully clothed. It's the only one in the movie. We can't have too much sex, people seem to enjoy. And obviously their enjoyment of it and our enjoyment of watching them do it is undercut by the fact that Joanna is his father's mistress, and this is all very Freudian and off-putting. And by the way, why is this off-putting? If Thomas had met Joanna at a party and decided to confide in her that he wanted to be a writer without them having a sexual relationship, or without him having knowledge of her sexual relationship with his father, this wouldn't be off-putting. What's bad about it? Sex. It's the sex that's bad. Dangerous sex is one of the negative memes. Sex is always presented as dangerous and foolish and a bad turn. 46 minutes into the film, Thomas discovers that his new friend, W.F. Gerald, is also the novelist Julian Stellers. And he is working on a new novel The Only Living Boy in New York, which of course is also the title of a song by Simon and Garfunkel. But the new novel is based on Thomas's life and family situation. 50 minutes into the film, Mimi is directly jealous of Thomas and Joanna. She doesn't know what's going on. She suspects. She says to Thomas, "Did you sleep with her?" And Thomas deflects Mimi. "Why do you care? Are you jealous?" And Mimi denies it. Thomas says, "She's my father's mistress. Do you think that I would do that?" Which is not a no. And Mimi says, "No." Thomas says, "Thank you." Mimi says, "You're sweet. You're not like them." Thomas says, "Like who?" Mimi says, "The city." Thomas is good. Thomas is sweet. Because as far as Mimi knows, Thomas is celibate. Thomas gives Mimi everything a boyfriend would give her: attention, affirmation, and so on. Mimi is intensely flirtatious with Thomas while in a relationship with the unseen offstage Nick. Thomas is good because he's not having sex. Cut to Thomas and Joanna in bed together. They are in bed, nude, apparently post-coital. Here's the trope, by the way. Thomas is covered from the hips down by the sheet. Joanna somehow has her own magic sheet that covers her breast. This you see all the time. It drives me nuts. It's so artificial. Why are two lovers who apparently were having sex 5 minutes ago lying in bed and she's covering her breast with the sheet? Even when she reaches for a cigarette, she holds the sheet to her breast. Why? That makes no sense. I understand it's because you don't want to show Kate Beckinsale's tits. It's not in her contract and it's not in the rating of this film or something. How about you put her in a t-shirt, a nightgown? You could have had sex while wearing the t-shirt. You could have put it on right afterward. The sheets thing is so artificial. Moving on. In this scene, Thomas tries to learn more about Joanna. Where did you grow up? What was that like? Joanna deflects these questions. She doesn't want to talk about it. She does say when he says, what was your father like, or what did he do? And Joanna says he put a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. But this is their big argument. This changes the course of their relationship in bed. The big turn for the worse in their strange relationship happens directly after they have sex. This is negative meme number 1, the wanting disaster. The wanting disaster is that if you have sex or want sex or pursue sex or talk about sex or are interested in sex, something bad happens, follows closely after, often as a direct causal relationship, sometimes as a metaphorical relationship, but the disaster happens shortly after the sex. Everything will come to a head at the publishing company's anniversary party. Ethan's publishing company is throwing an anniversary party. Mimi, having come to the realization that maybe Thomas has something better to do with his time than gaze at her crotch from afar, dumps the ever unseen Nick, and she tells Thomas this in the cab on the way to the party. When Thomas fails to start setting off Roman candles, Mimi says, "You're supposed to be more excited than that. You're supposed to think about going and fucking yourself, Mimi. You've been playing him along and putting him off and playing him along and putting him off, and you expect that his job is to jump into your lap as soon as you say, 'I dumped Nick.' Maybe he's got something else going on." Again, if a male character behaved this way, it would be villainous. That guy would be a jerk. When Mimi does it, the movie doesn't really come down on the side of her being a bad person, in fact. As we're going to see shortly, the movie treats her pretty well. At the party, Joanna dumps Thomas. This is all too complicated. She also says she was going to dump Ethan, but Ethan beat her to the punch by proposing to her, and she has accepted that proposal. By the way, in a moment of tremendous realism, Joanna says to him, "I really think that we should stop seeing each other." Which means, of course, I'm dumping you right now. This is over. But that kind of straightforward honesty is rare in life. Thomas is stunned by this news. He winds up fleeing the party in the rain. Mimi follows after him. Mimi chases him down. Thomas, outside in the rain. She runs up to him. She's very close to him. She murmurs to him again in her usual approach. She says, "I broke up with Nick because I got into Croatia," the writing program, the writing workshop she wanted. "And I want you to come with me." Mimi keeps doubling down on the dimensions of her asshole. What You've been telling him you're not my boyfriend, you're not me. You act like his girlfriend. You go out together to jazz clubs and so on and sit inches apart. You act like his girlfriend. When he says, I want you to be my girlfriend, you reply with, what do you think is happening, you dummy? And now, all of a sudden, I've dumped Nick, who she seems to treat just as badly as she treats Thomas, and I want you to move to Eastern Europe with me. Incidentally, we've never slept together. You're not my boyfriend. But you should throw everything you know straight up in the air, let the pieces fall where they may, and move to Eastern Europe where I will be in a prestigious writing program and you'll get to watch me do it. This is incredible selfishness. Mimi acts like it's the big reveal. And what happens is, oh, and notice, by the way, she does not rush up to Thomas and embrace him and kiss him and say, I want you to be my man. No, they don't do that. There's no sex in this encounter. Again, no sex. This movie about people's sex lives isn't about sex lives. It's mostly about shame lives and pain and heartache. And Thomas doesn't say, wow, that's sudden. Thomas says, I slept with Joanna. Mimi, clearly stunned, says, no, you're not like that. You're not like what? You're not like a person who wants to have sex? You should be celibate, Thomas, while Mimi toys with you? Evidently. But Thomas says, and I thought I was in love with her. And Mimi says, you're good. You're good. I refuse to believe what you're telling me because you're good, and apparently what you're telling me would make you bad, that you and another consenting adult had sexual encounters. And incidentally, Joanna is gorgeous. So it's not hard to imagine that he might want to do that. You're good. Notice that Mimi is apparently suggesting a sexual relationship, but Mimi doesn't say, I want you to be my boyfriend, I want you to be my lover, I want us to have sex. No, she says, I want you to come to Croatia with me. So even here, we don't directly reference sex. Language is so important. The language that's used to talk about sex in movies and that's used to push sex as far off stage as possible. Thomas's relationship with Joanna is bad because it involved their genitals. But what Mimi is proposing is good because it apparently doesn't. So that's the end of Thomas and Mimi. Thomas is bad, 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 bad because while Mimi was emphatically not his girlfriend ever, Thomas had a sexual relationship with someone else. The next day, Thomas, his father Ethan, and Joanna all end up in Ethan's office for the big reveal. That Thomas and Joanna have had sex automatically ends Ethan's relationship with Joanna. They're not getting married anymore. That's off. Ethan says to her, I deserve you. Ethan, you were screwing around on your wife. You expect strict monogamy? Okay. But again, notice it's sex. It's sex that's terrible. That she is beautiful and passionate and sexy is something that she should only be with Ethan. And this is a strange thing, that monogamy as a paradigm says, hey, you know what I want is a beautiful, passionate, sexy partner who only exists in that way for me. Before I walked into their life, that wasn't happening. And it's only ever going to happen for me. No, that's nonsense. That's how they are. You shouldn't have thought for a moment that she was only yours, but sex is a crime. It's Ethan's crime, it's Joanna's crime, it's Thomas's crime. Sex is your problem is sex. It's villains who sex is bad all the way around. This situation also ends Ethan's marriage to Judith in a very muted and off-camera way. Why? Judith is getting her Klonopin, which she has a prescription for. Judith is living in her Manhattan townhouse and throwing her dinner parties and apparently having a pretty good time. Why does it automatically end their relationship of decades? Because Ethan was having sex with somebody else. Well, he did propose. So let's give credit where credit's due. That's pretty serious business. But again, sex is the crime. Ethan should have devoted himself to his evidently sexless marriage. That he didn't is his great flaw. At the end of this scene, Ethan, stunned and perplexed, walks out of the office. He leaves Joanna and Thomas behind. How many times have I said Jonathan before? The guy's name is Thomas. Joanna hands Thomas a photograph from Ethan's desk that shows Thomas competing in a tennis match. Thomas played some tennis in college and high school. And clearly in the background, we see W.F. Gerald watching the match, a face in the crowd. And this is how Thomas realizes, and he puts this together with a few other clues that have been provided in the film, that W.F. Gerald is his genetic father. And he then goes to W.F. and says, "What's up here? Tell me what's going on." And W.F. says, "Well, before your father was a publishing executive, he wanted to be a writer, and your mother was beautiful, and I was one of their best friends. And they were married and in love and wanted a family, but your father's, Pierce Brosnan, is, Pierce Brosnan's character, I don't know anything about Pierce Brosnan personally, is sterile. So they asked me to do the honors. But I was in love with your mother, and I slept with her, and she got pregnant with you, and I flipped out and left. And yes, I'm your genetic father." So notice all of that drama was produced by what? Sex. They didn't want to do in vitro. WF explains. Why not? Because if they did in vitro, you wouldn't have to have sex, and then you wouldn't have this drama because sex is bad and leads to bad things. At the end of the movie, Thomas is portrayed as wiser. Having learned something, he's now writing, he's now submitting his writing. He will not allow Ethan, his, stepfather technically, to open any doors for him in the publishing industry because our hero is pure of heart. This kind of thing, by the way, is ridiculous. The idea of, if he allows Ethan to open doors for him, then he's a bad person, it's privilege. If they were working class people in Minneapolis and Ethan knew a guy who owned a car wash and got Thomas a job at the car wash, would we call that privilege? Right? I mean, everyone's parents try to help them. Of course they do. If I had a child, which I don't, by the way, if anyone's curious, but if I did and I sat here and said, "I want to tell you something, I don't give that child anything. That child can work it out for themselves," you would think I was a monster. Anyway, Thomas won't use Ethan to get anywhere in the publishing industry or allow him to assist him. Thomas, by the end of the film, is single. He's not with anyone. Mimi is off to Croatia and isn't coming back. Joanna is off stage. Ethan, evidently, is single and seems to be kind of redeemed for it. Judith, Thomas's mother, it's implied, is now in a romantic relationship with WF because we had a scene where she talked to Thomas about that whole situation, and she had strong feelings for WF and had often thought about him in the intervening years and certainly read his books. And we close with WF giving a reading of The Only Living Boy in New York, and Judith is sitting in the front row. But Judith and WF don't touch. They don't embrace. We don't see anything like that. They don't say, "I love you" to one another. They certainly don't have sex. We don't see them have sex. We don't see them refer to sex. They had sex one time 25 years ago, and that created all of this drama and all of these secrets. It was a bad thing. Now we're supposed to applaud because they're in a romantic relationship that lacks all physical passion or sexuality. So, here we are again, where you like and subscribe and mail this off to your friends so that you can talk about it, because this is some interesting business, and you should pay closer attention to this channel. God knows I do. I hang on my every word. Here we are again. No one in this movie is enjoying their sex life. People who aren't having sex are heroes. People who are having sex are making mistakes or are villains. Negativity, negativity, negativity. The wanting disaster. Sex is always a mistake. Sex is danger. Danger is sex. Sex is your problem. It's villains who have sex. All of these things seen again and again and again and again and again in popular film. Why? Why is this so common? Where are the exceptions? If you know of any exceptions, if you know of a film, a television show, anything where the portrayal of sexuality is positive, put it in the comments. I want to hear about it. I want to see it. I want to ride that unicorn. In the meantime, there'll be another one of these next week. Thanks for watching. I appreciate the time.